What is up, y'all? Philly Fly Show checking in here. Kicking it Right Way Production Studios, and we are back for another week of UFC fights. Won't be here next week for the 4th of July weekend, which kind of sucks. I wish I would put some fights on 4th of July weekend, but they do not. We got an early card this week for UFC Fight Night. Quick review of last week. Kajori Horiguchi just failed us epically. But we did go 8 for 12, and I want to shout out Gaston Bolaños for putting it to Michael Aswell in that plus 300, cash that thing to the bank, and it was very, very successful week. And a good night of fights for guys that were kind of prospects, and just getting the weeks rolling with these fight nights. This week we got Rafael Fiziev versus Manuel Torres. I am going to shout out myself for getting this new chair and this new vibe in here. Totally feels so much better sitting in an actual reclining chair instead of that weak ass gaming chair that I bought for $100 last year that I thought was going to be just change my life, but it didn't. It was just very bad. I did have a nice chair before this, but my dog ruined it in the bad way. Not chewing on it either. We'll say that. And also, I don't know how much I like it. I'm 50-50 on it so far. But the new meta rankings are out, and I don't like this whole AI taking over the rankings when it's literally like common knowledge on what the ranking system would be, because the way they put it in there with their algorithm, guys that got dropped. Rafael Fiziev is not ranked. He might be 1-4 in his last 5. That guy's not ranked, though, on the guys that he's fought, over a guy named Tom Nolan in there. Yeah. I think it needs a little bit of critiquing, and I'm just going to sit back and wait and see if this turns around, because this AI shit is just dumb. Just dumb. Why are we putting this in ranking systems? But I got the ranking fights here. I told you last week's went 8 for 12, which is pretty good. This week, the prelims start at 8 a.m. in the morning, and the main card starts at 11. It's nice to have early morning fights like that, but dog, really? Like, really? And I'm getting this out kind of late, so there's no Joe Money show this week. This is going to be the only show, so we're just going to jump into it. UFC Fight Night, Rafael Fiziev versus Manuel Torres. Yeah, we got 13 legs here. Let's get into it. Match leg number 13 is a welterweight bout. Both these guys are making their UFC debut. Tair Alabluvayev versus Jefferson Nascimento. Now, Tair is a negative 102 odds on there, and then Jefferson's negative 116, so you can pretty much call this a pick'em with the edge handing to Jefferson. But both guys making their debut is pretty cool, pretty good matchup for him. Tair is 4-1 in his last 5, 19-3 with a record coming in here and on a 4-fight win streak. His counterpart is an undefeated fighter, though, obviously 5-0 in his last fight. He is a 13-0 fighter coming here and has never felt defeat. And both these guys, they come up through some decent undercard promotions for MMA to get your name in the box. But I'm going to go Jefferson here. I don't know way enough to go off of and get a good grasp here, so I'm only doing 1 out of 5 on the confidence level, but I hope we get a good fight there. Match leg number 12 is a bantamweight fight, and this is overseas, obviously, so there's no females on this card for some reason. I don't like that, but hey, I don't make the cards. Bantamweight bout between Begzat Alakahan versus Gene Masamudo. Now, Gene is a negative 156 favorite. Begzat is a plus 132 underdog. I like both these guys, but I just think Gene's a way better fighter. He might not have the experience, I don't think, but way better fighter. Begzat is 3-2 in his last 5, 1-2 in his UFC record, and coming off a decision loss to, I don't know his first name, but it's the little brother Topuria, and that dude looks like the real deal at this weight class. His counterpart is 3-2 in his last 5 and 3-2 in the UFC, and coming off a decision loss to a name that I wasn't big on, so I didn't really want to put him out there. But I think Gene gets back on the boat and gets his feet wet and gets a big W on Saturday. But I'm only 1 out of 5 on the confidence level because Begzat is game and can fight. Match leg number 11 here is a welterweight bout between Daniil Donachenko versus Theodore Bekrin. Theodore is a plus 400 underdog, whereas Daniil's a negative 520 favorite. Obviously, I think the odds makers got this one right. Daniil's 5-0 in his last 5. He's got a 2-0 UFC record, and he is on a 7-fight win streak mixed in with the undercard promotions in the UFC. His counterpart is making his UFC debut. He is 3-2 in his last 5, an 8-3 fighter, and on a 2-fight win streak. But to make your UFC debut against a guy like Donchenko, it's not a good matchup. Now the odds makers do have good faith in Theodore, but I just don't see it happening. I think Theodore gets his ass beat very badly on Saturday. 3 out of 5 on the confidence level that Daniil Donchenko gets his hand raised after the fight. Now, here's a good featherweight bout that nobody's going to tell you about. It's a good banger fight to me. Khan Ofle versus Javier Reyes. Javier is a -200 favorite, whereas Khan is a +168 underdog. Khan's more of a freestyle fighter, whereas Javier is a good striker, and he's got power in those hands in the featherweight division. So Khan's going to have to be on a defensive head movement game and not want to get caught. Khan's 3-2 in his last 5. 2-2 in the UFC and on a 2-fight win streak. Coming into Javier's counterpart is 4-1 in his last 5, 1-0 in the UFC on a 3-fight win streak. But his last 2 wins have been KO. One was in the Dana White Contender Series and then one in the UFC, and they came pretty quickly. So he's got the power in his hands, and like I said, hopefully he's going to have to work around it. But being a freestyle fighter like he is, I think he can get it done. I think he's got the experience to beat him. And I just got to see Javier beat some more talent and see if he's actually got it. So I'm going to go Ofle, but I'm only 1 out of 5 on the confidence level that he can get his hand raised. Match like number 9, here's a middleweight bout between Nursultan Ruzabev and Andrei Pulayev. Pulayev's a +168 underdog, whereas Ruzbek's a -235 favorite. Ruzbek's 4-1 in his last 5, 4-1 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight win streak. His counterpart in Andrei's 3-2 in his last 5, 1-2 in the UFC, and coming off a decision loss to Gutierrez, but taking someone like Gutierrez to a decision means he's still game. So the odds makers may be in a little bit of favor of Ruzabev, but I think it's a little closer than that. It's a little bit scarier. I'm confident on it because I'm pretty confident on Ruzabev to win the fight, which is obviously who I'm picking. But Andre is game, and you do not want to. I wouldn't put this one on a parlay. That's all I got to say. I'm confident that Ruzabev wins, but I'm not confident enough to put it on a parlay. Obviously, Ruzabev wins 3 out of 5 on the confidence level that he gets his hand raised. Match number 8 is a light heavyweight bout between Abdul Rahman Anavayev versus Julius Walker. Walker is a +390 underdog, -5 favorite. 550 on Abdul. Abdul's 5-0 in his last 5, 2-0 in the UFC, and then he's a 9-0 fighter. Has not tasted defeat, and he has not tasted defeat on Saturday. Julius Walker, 3-2 in his last 5, 1-2 in the UFC, coming off a KO loss to Dustin Jacoby. I think Abdul's just as good as Justin Jacoby, so I'm going to pick Abdul for a big win on Saturday. 3 out of 5 on the confidence level. I'd pick him to get a finish if you want to sweeten those odds on there. All right, match like number 7 here before I lose my voice. Welterweight bout between Farhan Asanov versus Eric Nolan. Eric Nolan's a +146 underdog, whereas Farham's a -180 favorite. Farham is making his UFC debut. He's an undefeated fighter, and he's 5-0 coming into these fights. Eric Nolan's got way more experience than him. Eric's 4-1 in his last 5, 0-1 in the UFC, but he got a submission loss to Sergikayev and took that fight on short notice. Yeah, looked decent in that fight, too, that he can actually compete in this MMA UFC promotion. But he's got to fight guys like this and get his experience up. He's beaten Farham on Saturday, cashed that to the bank, but I'm not very confident on it because the odds makers have it the other way. So 1 out of 5 on the confidence level, Eric can get his hand raised. Match like number 6 is a banger. This is a don't miss fight. They better put this fight on the first fight on the main card because they've been doing this thing where they're going back to 5 fights on the main card. I don't mind that on a pay-per-view because that's what it's supposed to be. But on the fight nights, it's supposed to be 6. So leave it at that. Middleweight bout between Abdus Magomedov versus Mikhail Olajszak. Now, Mikhail, -114 favorite-ish. Abdul, -106. You can flip sides. You can take your coin and do whatever you want. Philly Fly Show's got the advantage here. I really love both these fighters, but I think Mikhail is on a different trajectory than a Boost. Mikhail went to Fighting Nerds and has just absolutely put it on people. He's always had good hands and power in those hands, and people underestimate him. And he's always had good grappling, but he's taken that to another level when he's gone to the Fighting Nerds. Abus, he is 3-2 in his last 5, 4-3 in UFC. He's coming off a submission loss to Joe Pyfer. That's not a bad loss, but I just don't see him. I don't know how he got submitted by Joe Pyfer. Mikhail, 3-2 in his last 5, 10-7 in UFC, and on a 3-fight win streak and just taking out killers. He's taking out another killer on Saturday. Abus likes to get in those brawls. He's got the reach to beat Mikhail, but here's where Mikhail's going to flourish. He'll get in there. He'll take a shot to give you 2 or 3 now, and those 2 or 3 are deadly. And Abus has not got great head movement and keeps his chin a little too high, so I'm going to go with Olajaychik, and I'm cashing that one to the bank with that negative 114, but I'm only going to say 1 out of 5 on the confidence level, just because Abus is got the skill set to win. It's just, if he gets in that brawl and he can keep his chin tucked, he'll be fine, but if he keeps that chin out, it's over. Matchup number 5 is another middleweight bout. Ikram Aliskerov versus Bruno Ferra. Bruno's plus 235 underdog. Ikram negative 300 favorite. Ikram is 4-1 in his last 5, 4-1 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight win streak since losing to our good old boy Robert Whittaker. Bruno is 3-2 in his last 5, 6-3 in UFC, and he's coming off a bad KO from RoboCop. RoboCop put him into a different century. It's a bad guy to fight right there right now. But Aliskerov is a 14th ranked guy, and he's going to show it on Saturday. Bruno, again, likes to get in brawls, keep his chin in the air, and take too many shots as of late. Earlier Bruno, not so much. This side of Bruno, very much. So I'm going Ikram here, and I'm going to say 1 out of 5 just because that counter Bruno is savage. Matchup number 4 is a flyweight bout between the number 7 ranked Asu Alambayev versus Charles Johnson, the 15th ranked flyweight. Charles a plus 205 underdog. Asu is a negative 260 favorite. Asu's not losing this fight, man. His wrestling is way too good. His gas tank's way too good. Charles may be able to strike with people and have power for a flyweight, but he's not putting on a show against Asu. Asu's going to make a show of him and just pure domination. Asu is 4-1 in his last 5, 6-1 in the UFC, and on a 2-fight win streak. His counterpart in Charles Johnson's 3-2 in his last 5, 8-6 in the UFC, and coming off a decision win against Bruno Silva. But again, Asu's just going to make him look like he's not supposed to be there. Matchup number 3 here is a lightweight bout between Nassim Sadikov versus Matus Camilo. Camilo's a plus 172 underdog, whereas Nassim's a negative 215 favorite. I really like Nassim's game. He's well-rounded, good striker, decent grappler. But he got knocked out in his last fight by Faris Zayem. Now he's 3-1-1 in his last 5, and Nassim 4-1-1 in the UFC, and coming off a KO loss to Zayem. His counterpart in Matus is 4-1 in his last 5, 1-1 in the UFC, and got a decision win under his belt, but not against a guy that needs to be mentioned here. I like Camilo's game, but Nassim just, again, I think taking that loss, perfect time to take a loss and get back on that horse and beat somebody up. So let's go Nassim to get that win. 3 out of 5 on the confidence level. He puts Camilo out of there. Co-main event of the evening, we got Shira the Bullet, Shira Managomedov versus Michel Pereira. Now, this is a pretty decent fight because these guys are going to stand and bang. Negative 370 on Shara, plus 280 on Pereira. Pereira's got some crazy power. I'd rather risk it on Pereira on the bet, but if you want to put a gun to my head on who's going to win, because I'm not confident in this fight, because it's a point fighter versus a power striker, I'm going to pick the point fighter just because if it comes down to a very close fight, they're overseas, and I think they'll give it to Shara. And that's my only reason for picking him. I don't like betting that fight. I'd only like risking it on that one on Pereira's side. But I'm picking Shara to win. I'm not confident on it, though. But Lightweight bout, main event of the evening, boys and girls, cats and dogs. We're here for a good fight, and I mean a good fight. We get to see if Rafael Fiziev, negative 114, can jump back on that bandwagon and get some wins under his belt. Maybe turn this into a point fight and not be such a knockout artist, but hey, man, he can wrestle, he can strike, he can do it all, man, but Fiziev just hasn't been the Fiziev that we saw coming up through the rankings because he's not been the same guy. He's fighting killers, though, so losing to killers just means you're just not up to that level. Manuel Torres, now also Fiziev, fell off the rankings because of these meta rankings, and I already said that, and I don't like that. His counterpart, Manuel Torres, has some good wins under his belt and very well-rounded and got some crazy good power, and his striking is crisp. Accurate and crisp, and that's how he hurts dudes. He's a negative 106, essentially pick him. 13th ranked Manuel Torres got those hands. Rafael Fiziev is 1-4 in his last 5, 7-5 in the UFC, coming off a KO loss to Mauricio Hufi. Again, not a bad loss, but he got torqued in that one. His counterpart's 4-1 in his last 5, 5-1 in the UFC on a 2-fight win streak, both KOs of Drew Dober and Grant Dawson. Very good wins there. Keep his ranking. This was hard, man, because I think Fiziev can beat Torres in a point fight, but Torres is just going to put it on him. And if it goes into a brawl, Fiziev's not been good in a brawl as of late, and Torres has. So Torres, I'm going to give the advantage to Torres, and I'm going to pick Torres to win 1 out of 5 in the comments. Somebody gets his hand raised, but hey, that's what we're here for, boys and girls. Anything can happen. You've seen me kill it in this whole series I have on my channel here on my show for UFC, but things bad can happen. I don't see that happening this week, though, and we got some good fights to watch. Manuel Torres, big win on Saturday. Let's go. Cash to the bank. Shout out to Right Way Production Studios for always making this happen. We'll see y'all next week. Peace.